Shalom. Welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabados of Delmar, together with my co-host Mark Ronich of Statewide News Service, jbiztechphilly.com, and now columnist for the Jewish Press.
And I'm having a lot of fun doing all of that. So with us today, we always like to have the arts on our program. Tammis Groft. She's the director of the Albany Institute of History and Art, which is celebrating its 225th year this year.
I know.
I'm just amazed. So welcome to the Jewish View, and I just want people to know we didn't take us 225 years to get you here.
I'm not that old either. I'm 29 years old.
Yeah, none of us have portraits in the attic,
Tell
right?
us about that history, though. What's 225? The whole city is only 300 years old.
I know.
1791 was the first. Yeah.
So we were founded in 1791. So it makes us the oldest museum in New York State,
Really?
and the second oldest museum in the country.
How do you like that?
So, and the
Behind?
museum in South Carolina is the oldest, and they were
Okay.
founded in 1773. But when you think of a museum and think of the Albany Institute today, in 1791, it was a little bit different. It was really more of a learned society. It was modeled after the Royal Society in London, which was founded in 1660. And in our institution was really formulated by the New York State Legislature.
Mhm.
So we were unofficially part of the New York State Legislature. The goal was to give a variety of papers and have discussions related to the industrial arts and agriculture, so that it would help the citizens of New York State become more successful in those endeavors.
And that was before Albany was designated as the state capital, right?
Well, yes, you're absolutely right. So
I think Kingston and
1797.
Poughkeepsie
Yeah.
were the capitals before Albany.
Absolutely. So when we opened our doors, we were based in Federal Hall in New York City.
That's what I was going to say. Where
Yep.
your location now is on Washington Avenue.
Right, but in 1791, we were in Federal Hall, and eventually, as the New York State Capitol finally came to Albany in 1797, as the legislation discusses, the forerunner of the Albany Institute came to Albany, and we had what you would call rented rooms, or rooms in the New York State Capitol, and that was how it all worked out.
And what was the name of the Albany Institute of History and Art before? Because he wouldn't call it Albany if it was in Federal Hall in New York City.
No, exactly. So it was called the Society for the Promotion of Arts, Agriculture, and Manufacturing, and which was then called SPAM, which has a little bit different point of view than as it does today. So SPAM, so Society of Promotion.
When did you move to this
Agricultural.
Washington Avenue?
We moved in 1907 when we built the building.
Well, 100 years
So
old.
yeah.
Well,
But what was interesting is there was an event in Albany in 1886. It was the bicentennial of the city of Albany, and there was an exhibit down in front of City Hall at the Academy Building, the Albany Academy Building, which is now the new City Education Building, and there was a big exhibition, 4,000 objects. 25,000 people came through the doors. So it was that point the people in Albany decided to have the Albany Institute, because by then it was called the Albany Institute, right about 1820, join forces with an art gallery and a historical gallery. And then that is really the roots of the Albany Institute, and it's why we're called the Museum of History and Art.
Very interesting. You know, I've been there, of course, because of number one, I've loved history and I do love museums. And one of the major, can I say the biggest exhibit is the Egyptian? I know to me it's pretty big. I never measured it.
Absolutely. It's the most popular exhibition we have at the Albany Institute.
Say, how did you get, a little bit, when I take kids there, I write New York City or Washington, how does Albany,
Why do
did
we
you
have those
acquire?
mummies?
Well, it's nice to see them, but how did you acquire them?
It's a great question. So when we opened our doors on Washington Avenue in 1907, the board of directors said it was just like the Met, just like the Philadelphia Museum. And if we all walked in there that day, we would have seen art, decorative arts, historical artifacts, and ethnographic materials from all over the world. think about the Met, think about the Philadelphia Museum, because the board of directors said in order to be a real museum, you have to have real Egyptian mummies. So people from Albany were appointed to go to Egypt, and at the Cairo Museum in Egypt, they were selling mummies, not kings and queens, but in our case, priests, to educational institutions, because they had just discovered this huge cache of new mummies, and they just didn't have enough room. So if you were a qualified educational institution, you could purchase mummies from the Cairo Museum. Yeah.
1907?
1907.
Right at the beginning.
Right at the beginning. And then what happened in 1926, the board of directors changed the mission, and they decided they would collect art, decorative arts, and historical artifacts related to the art, history, and culture of the upper Hudson Valley from the 17th century to the present. So all of those other European materials, all of the other ethnographic materials were all sold. And so what we have in the museum today, which is 35,000 objects, 1 million documents in the library, all have some relationship to the history of the upper Hudson Valley. The mummies, of course, are related to the history of the museum,
Right.
because the board of directors thought it was so important to have mummies.
Well, I have to tell you, in May, I have a great promotional day for you.
Okay.
Have Mummies Day.
Oh, yes, Mummies Day.
Yeah,
yes,
lousy.
yes.
All right.
I know.
The second Sunday.
You know, it's a great idea. You're not the first, and you won't be the last.
Okay.
But we are on the Jewish View, and I use, when I teach children, one of my 10 jobs, I teach it to my Maimonides Hebrew Day School. And of course, Egyptian history is an intrinsic part of the Jewish history. I mean, the Bible, the Exodus story. And, I tell them about, I like to frame into real, when you talk to kids, some of you talk about animals or forests, and I'm proponent of, like you're talking about the Revolutionary War. Let's go to Saratoga, you see, what I'm saying is they're talking from a book. I mean, you can't go over to World War II where you're going to go to Normandy. But I'm just saying when you can, I just like hands-on, because to kids it becomes real. And I talk about, the Jews were enslaved in Egypt. Go to the, Washington Avenue Museum, and you see what life is all about. Or, then, because I'm teaching Judaism, they were worshiping idols. So I remember that they have a lot of these idols. See what they were worshiping. The news was to believe in one God, what kind of lifestyle that they were living, and being enslaved and looking pyramids or the different cultures. So I like that hands-on for kids to become real to them, not just reading out of a book or even with a few pictures. So
I have to ask you, did you ever open up the mummy tombs and make sure that there's a real mummy, a real mummified individual in there?
Well, funny you should ask that question. I mean, we have 2 mummies at the Albany Institute. One is from the 21st dynasty, Ankh-Fenmut. The other is a priest that's from the Ptolemaic period, which is near the Roman period. And Samuel Brown is the man who purchased the mummies at the Cairo Museum. And he asked the director and the curator at the Cairo Museum in 1907 to unwrap the mummy, at least half of it, so he could make sure he was getting another real mummy. And also, he thought it would be very educational for people to be able to see how many layers of linen it would take to mummify a person. So you can see that in our collection. You can see the way it's been cut away.
Oh, okay.
So we do have that. The other thing...
So you've authenticated that
we have authenticated
a real person in there at one point.
Yes,
okay.
Very definitely, and you can see this person.
Because otherwise we got to go to the Attorney General's Frauds Bureau, and we got to start an investigation.
Start all over. Well, I don't know if there a couple of years ago we had a major exhibition where we took, remember we bought the pieces at the Cairo Museum. Well, the people at the Cairo Museum sold the coffin lid to a museum in Vienna and the mummy board to the museum in the British Museum. And a couple of years ago, we reunited this coffin, this 21st dynasty coffin. And when we purchased the two mummies, the people told us we were buying a man and a woman. I don't know how they knew, but that's what they told us. So we had them CAT scanned and X-rayed, and it turns out we thought we had a man and a woman. We now know very definitely that we have two men. So that new technology, you have new scholarship combined with science and new technology, and we were able to learn a lot more about our mummies. You think you know everything there is to know, but science is always changing.
Aside from the male anatomy, how else did they know that it was a man?
It's really looking at the brow, the structure of the brow. There's also the structure of the back of the skull.
Really?
And in the pelvic region, there are differences.
Okay.
But in this, there are differences, bone
Okay.
structure differences.
And that's basically how they...
Yeah,
okay.
And the density of the bones and certain other things. So it was fascinating. It was absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, that's why I asked, because it seems like fascinating.
Besides the
all these years
Egyptian
later.
exhibit, you have temporary exhibits going on?
We do. We try to have, the Egyptian exhibition is always on view, so that's very important long term. We also have a long-term exhibition on colonial Albany, who are the people who lived and settled this area in the 17th and the 18th century, and that's very popular with school groups. Other temporary exhibitions, we have one called 50 Objects, the Capital Region in 50 Objects, and that is a community-curated exhibition. In other words, the curators at the museum, we created an outline, and we worked with the Times Union, and we asked the community, the readership, what would you say are the significant people, places, and events that happened in the Hudson River Valley?
Well, Nipper is like one of them.
Well, so funny you should bring up Nipper. All the curators, the historians, we didn't have Nipper on the list. It was the #1 response from the community, which says why you should ask your community.
That's right.
You have to involve the community, and I feel very strongly about that. So we have a lot of exhibits where we invite the community to help us, because after all, we're creating exhibits for our community. So
Well, I have to tell you that a friend of mine who grew up in Albany in the 50s had told me that they used to dress up Nipper at different seasons.
Really?
And they used to
really?
put sweaters on Nipper in the fall, and a big coat on Nipper in the winter. And they used to really get up to the top of the roof there and just really take care of Nipper.
That's a great story. No one's told me that story. So I'd be very curious if anybody has any photographs of this. Wouldn't that be a lot of fun?
That would be.
That is great, because in our library collection, we have about 1 million documents, including over 100,000 photographs documenting the city and the region, starting from the 1850s. So it's a great
what about
collection.
the Albany Jewish history? I know there have been a few books written about that. So there is a section about the Jewish history of the synagogues, because some of them were knocked down because of urban renewal.
Yeah, and what we have in the collection is we did an exhibition on the Jewish experience in Albany, and we had a wonderful curator, and I'm going to think of her name in 1 minute. I didn't think of that beforehand. But anyway, so we worked with various rabbis and synagogues and collected stories. We have a lot of photographs in our collection documenting the Jewish experience in Albany. We also have portraits, Mr. and Mrs. Hamburger. They're wonderful portraits that document earlier. They're traveling from Germany to Albany in the 1840s. We have a great Kiddush cup in the collection and lots of photographs, wonderful photographs documenting the businesses in Albany.
You mentioned Hamburger because one of the memorial plaques is at Beth Abraham Jacob.
Really?
Yeah.
Is it really?
I always laughed when I saw Hamburger, because I think of Perry Mason and Hamilton Burger and Hamburger.
Right.
Okay.
So I wonder if that is.
You can match some of your photographs with the memorial plaques at Beth Abraham Jacob, because they saved them from when it was Sons of Abraham and when it was the Hamilton, the Herkimer Street Synagogue. which was
Right.
also built in 1907.
Yeah.
The
Oh,
cornerstone
that's very
says
interesting.
1907.
Yeah.
So, if you know, but I would strongly recommend that maybe you have, you know, the week before Rosh Hashanah or the week before Passover, that you have open up and just make the Jewish collection so that more and more people, because we're a crossroads here.
Right.
For people
Oh,
traveling between Muncie and Montreal and
Right.
Boston
New York,
and Toronto, and you know, we really have a lot of people who could come through and
Right.
be real interested in this.
And we did just install a small exhibition highlighting the collections that I just mentioned that have been on view here at the museum. So, and I also, Dr. Beth Clopet was the curator for the exhibition. And it was quite a number of years ago, but I just had to think about that.
Clopet?
Clopet?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank
I
you.
know.
Let's deal with numbers now. How many people go through the museum? When are you open during the year? How
well,
much does it cost to get in?
Sure.
How much does it
We
cost to
have
get out?
about 20, about 25 to 30,000 people come through the Albany Institute. And that also includes a lot of the school groups. We have about 10,000 school groups.
You know what, it's not anything personal in museum, but I heard that, like, you go to New York City, Sunday is like, my kids actually went down there, and they said, it's like a block long
It's
just to
a-
get to a museum. And then when I went downtown one time, it's like, I hate to say, but Albany's like dead, you know, on
Yeah.
a Sunday. I mean, it's nothing, your
No,
museum, it's a
you're-
shame that, you know, people don't, you know, come to
You're absolutely right. I mean, there aren't a lot of people who live downtown, which, but I think that's changing. You know, I think there are a lot more people living downtown. I live actually over a couple of blocks from the Albany Institute, so there are a lot of families and all of that. And in terms of our hours, we are open Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, and Saturdays from 10 until 5. Sundays from noon till 5. But we're also open on Thursday nights. We're open from 10 to 8 on Thursdays. So we are free to the general public at starting
whole
at
thing?
5 o'clock.
5 to 8, so 5 to 8.
5 to 8. And then we also have free federal holidays, and we have support from M&T Bank. And these are days, they're Mondays, and most museums are closed on Mondays, so we get anywhere between 500 to 600 or 700 people on these Mondays because we have activities, we have a lot of children's programming, art making programs and lectures and that type of
Are
thing.
there art classes, because it is a museum of history and art?
And art, yes, there are Saturday mornings, there's an art for all that occurs all day on Saturday for art making activity. But the Thursday night programming, we have done some art making activities, and it really depends. We're looking at broadening our audiences. But Sundays are also very helpful.
I think
Yes.
the hours on your website, if you see what I circled there, it says you're open from midnight.
Oh, we're open till midnight.
From
Ooh.
midnight to,
So
well, it says 12 a.m.
12,
So-
yes,
so
12
12
after
midnight.
midnight.
So I think
Oh,
you need
no, wait
to-
a minute, 12 after
12 a.m.
a.m.
would be midnight.
Oh,
12
right.
p.m. would be
Oh,
noon.
lovely.
Now you're up there at the
You know, I
museum,
I live at the museum. You know, I have a little camp couch.
So I need to
Thank you very
let
much for showing
can-
me that.
You can have that.
I
That's
can have
fine.
that. We will correct it. The other thing we've
Because I don't want
done.
anyone knocking on your door at midnight saying you said you
Yeah,
were open.
we said we were open. Well, you'd be the only one there, I think, except for those
Yeah,
mummies,
yeah,
by
I
the
was saying
way.
the
The
mummies.
mummies would be there.
So
Make a
it's-
good film over here, you know,
All right,
at night
all right.
with the mummies.
So
And
what- you
we
s-
did open a cafe as
Okay.
well.
Tell us
And
about
our
that.
cafe are the same hours as the museum, but the cafe is open on Tuesdays.
So you have it says something about Van Rensselaer's death in 1839 was a setback for the Institute. Its functions were also duplicated. What happened with, why was Van Rensselaer's passing setback?
Stephen Van Rensselaer III was what we all would call a Renaissance man or a well-educated person at
When
that
did he
particular
live?
time.
When is this?
He died in 1839,
Yeah.
so it was the late 18th century, early 19th century, and he was very involved with RPI, and RPI was very strong in the areas of practical applications of science. And so there was a time and the Albany Institute during that time period was also interested in science. But RPI certainly was going to be doing a much better job. So it was a duplication of interests and services. So with his strong leadership, we continued. But after that, it had, some I would say the membership was not as strong, and it took about 2 decades for the Albany Institute, as we may know it today, to come back up, rebound. And, it's just that, like today, there's so many things to do, so many opportunities for other activities for people to do.
And one of the things that Stephen Van Rensselaer was a former lieutenant governor, and he also served in Congress. So he was a prominent individual in our New York society.
He wasn't the first Rensselaer, though. I mean, he's like the Rensselaer County.
Yeah, but not the
him.
first. His probably.
I think it's an old family. That's
It
what I'm
is.
saying.
It is.
Like
the whole reason, perhaps, although that's a pretty broad statement, but Killian K. Van Rensselaer was the first patroon, and when Albany was founded, I would say it was a trading post with the Dutch West India Company.
Yes, I thought he was.
So
a
Killian,
lot earlier. Yeah.
Yep, in the 17th century, and he was given 40,000 acres of land.
Should have held on to it over
Yeah,
there.
the biggest land giveaway in history. So, but he never actually came here. He was a diamond merchant in Amsterdam. Never came here. But his family settled the area.
You're saying Killian never came here?
No, Killian Van Rensselaer, the first Rensselaer, never actually set foot on the shores of America.
Because if you look at the engraving that's in the basement of Albany City Hall, they have one of the first stones, and it says Killian Van Rensselaer. And it could just be a reference to him.
Could be a reference, but
being there,
you know how this goes? You name your sons after. See, there's Killian K. Van Rensselaer the first, the second, the third. Not exactly, but Stephen Van Rensselaer was the third of the Van Rensselaer family. So there was more than one Killian K. Van Rensselaer.
What do you see for the next 225 years?
Very exciting, very
Tell us
exciting.
what the stock is if you know what it's going to be.
Oh, if only I could predict that. Well, one of the things that I like to say about the museum is we have been around for 225 years. We have changed our location 7 times. We've changed our name 7 times. So we're very nimble, and we're always want to reflect the community where we live and in the changes in times and people's needs and interests and that type of thing. So I think if you're willing to change and willing to work with your community curated exhibitions, being open different hours so that we can broaden our community. I hope that we continue on in that vein. Museums, one of our number one job is to preserve the collections because we're preserving the history of the people who have lived and worked here over 225 years in our case. So if that's our number one responsibility, and if we continue doing that and making all of these collections available and interpreting them.
You'll be fulfilling your mission then.
Yeah.
But just what to add on, are there any projects to add on history?
Well, I mean, adding on to the museum, we have 3 floors of state-of-the-art storage. And that our last construction process was to bring in climate control, security, and storage. I would say going forward that the museum, if I were running the museum in 225 years from now, I would certainly expand the museum because we have wonderful things in storage that people don't get a chance to see very often. So that you would like to have a lot more of your things on storage.
I mean, the property, where would you
It's
even
1.5
see
acres.
expand?
Yeah, but we have a parking lot That's a pretty cool thing. We have a parking lot. So just imagine maintaining your parking lot, but building up.
And
All right.
over the parking lot and then building.
Right,
That's interesting,
exactly, exactly. And then we would have more physical space for exhibitions so that you can take things out of storage and have them on view and accessible to everybody.
That's interesting.
You know, websites are great. We have wonderful collections on our website, but still, I think we as a population will always want to see the real thing. You know, how big is it? What's the, what does it look like? Not that everybody can pick it up and, rattle it around or anything, but still to be able to see the real
I know it's
thing.
interesting, but once you take my mind that some people argue, when you look at a museum and, your eyes go roll in your head after 2 hours standing up, looking at
2 hours,
things.
yeah. That's museum fatigue. I'd give I'd give it about an hour.
I know, but some people are there
Yeah.
and they say, and then you start reading it, and how much can you read already
Right.
and absorb? And they said, well, if it would just be on a website, then I could just read it in my living room and sit back and I
yeah.
saw, you're right, the real thing is the real thing, but just to read all the little print, and, some people are curious. I am.
Sure.
A lot of times I read
Yeah.
everything about it. Is that something that's in the works? I mean, when you say the website, maybe I should go onto the website.
You should
should.
definitely
What's the
go
name of
onto
the
the
website?
website,
What is
www.albanyinstitute.org.
All right,
Yeah.
good.
Mhm.
Oh, we'll have to visit it and also go on the website.
Yeah.
Mark, you wanna come with me?
Yeah, we're gonna definitely go.
Yeah, you're
Uh,
you're just on the block.
Your museum is on the U.S. National Register of Historic Places.
Correct.
I don't believe we said that, so I wanted to plug that.
Right, thank you very much,
That was,
right.
that-
And the building was built as a museum in 1907.
And I think you were added on, like, in the bicentennial, July 12th of '76, as designated.
Yes, because we
You-
have two historic buildings.
Oh, where's the other one?
Well, one is the museum, and the other one we call the Rice House,
Yeah,
which is also a historic property.
the Rice Building
The
that's
Rice
across
Building.
the street?
No, it's now all one complex. So
Oh,
we have the
okay.
Rice House, which
Oh,
is a
okay.
yellow Flemish brick building that has the big banner that says Albany Institute
I
of
see.
History and Art. And there's what we call an atrium,
Yeah.
which connects the two buildings. And then the other building that's set back a bit is the museum building from
I
1907.
really like the atrium. That was done about a little more than 10 years ago?
Yeah, exactly. 14 years ago. We
Yeah.
reopened in 2001.
I think that was a phenomenal
Yeah.
addition and made something that seemed dated really more modern
Right.
and
Yeah.
brought to life. It's the it's the
It's-
glass
In the
It's-
museum?
Right.
outside. When you pass by, you see this.
Well, I
These
didn't
glass
know there was a
windows.
special name for that.
And
Yeah, it's called an
atrium.
atrium because
Yeah.
it's 3 floors and there's stairways that go up.
You have wonderful seminars there
Mm-hmm.
at the museum, but you also have wonderful legislative receptions there as well.
We have, right, we have a lot of different activities. So for example, Bill Kennedy, our one Nobel, or our Pulitzer Prize winning
Yes.
author, came a couple of weeks ago to talk about how Albany influenced his books. And we had about 150 people there for that. So, so we use it for educational activities.
Do you have an email list where you send out information
Yes.
to people?
And in fact, of course, I would love everybody to become a member because then you can come into the museum for free as a member. But we also have an email list. And if you contact the Albany Institute, you can just ask to be on the list and you
Right.
get all of the information
Because I
sent
wish I had known
every week.
that William Kennedy was going to be there. He was my teacher at University at Albany
Oh.
for English.
Yeah.
And he was writing Ironweed at the time. And we weren't paying attention. He wasn't the best teacher. He's a better author. And he just said, look, you're not interested in what I'm teaching. Leave if you want to. And those who want to stay can stay and listen to this book I'm writing.
Oh.
So about 5, 6 of us stayed. And he told us about Ironweed in Old Albany and
Oh, how
what it was
nice.
like with the
Yeah.
flop houses and all that. And, we just, I was just enthralled, and then all of a sudden I see it on the screen at the Palace. I'm like,
Yeah,
wow, this is
yeah.
what he was talking about.
Right.
So,
Well, in our 50 Objects exhibition, a man wrote in and said that William Kennedy should be one of your 50 objects. And he'd like to see him sitting in the exhibition in a chair with some whiskey for 3 months. So I emailed Bill Kennedy, who uses our library quite a bit, and I told him what had happened. I said, do you have anything in your collection that you can lend to the exhibition? So when you come to the exhibition, you will see this great photograph of Bill Kennedy as a younger man in front of a typewriter, and we have the typewriter in the exhibition, the photograph, and one of his sheets from when he was reading Ironweed. One thing Bill Kennedy said is he is forever editing his own things, and he can have a stack 4 feet high of edited manuscripts that he keeps going back on.
On Broadway in Albany, they do have a company that manufactures Ironweed whiskey.
Yes, I know, I know.
So I do have a bottle of that. So,
do you really?
Yes,
oh,
I do.
Good.
So anyway, thank you very much.
You're
for
quite
coming.
welcome.
This
What a
was
pleasure.
Really,
Thank you for inviting
Tammis,
me.
thank you very much. Continue good work, and Mark and I are going to visit, and I hope all our viewers come and visit you too in the Institute of History and Art, and I look forward to it, and continue with your good work with good health.
Yes.
Great. Thank
Continued
you
success.
very, very much.
Thank
What a
you.
pleasure.